Clueless is many things. It's a 1990s classic, it's a satire of high school kids, and it's also a contemporary Jane Austen adaptation. But none of these things have stood the test of time as well as the movie's fashion. Almost 30 years later, we still remember Cher's iconic yellow plaid suit, which even has become a Halloween staple. We also still think of Dionne's crazy hats, and also we still remember the funny outfit matching software Cher uses every morning and her crazy fluffy pens. The movie came out in 1995, and I remember watching it a bit later. I was a bit too young when it came out for the first time, and in general American movies were always launched a bit later in the German-speaking countries. I think the reason back then was because they had to be dubbed. But I remember when the movie came out and we first watched it, we were all obsessed. We loved it. I'm not so sure if we got it that it was a satire, but I loved the fashion. I was obsessed with the software that Cher uses every morning to match her clothes. And I have to admit, I had one or two of these fluffy pens. Let's take a look behind the scenes today. I'm going to share how the outfits came to life on screen. And just as a side note here, this is a non-sponsored post. I'm just sharing my personal opinion and my research here. Let's start with one of the most iconic outfits of the movie, or maybe the most iconic outfit of the movie. It's Cher's yellow plaid suit that I mentioned in the introduction. Cher is the main character of the movie, and also the clothes should emphasize that, and this is why Mony May opted for this yellow plaid suit with this skirt that is also closed with safety pin in front. This is not only a nod to the Scottish kilts and also kind of school uniforms. The safety pin is a nod to the grunge culture, and this was what was actually going on in American schools. Grunge culture was a big influence in fashion, but there's absolutely nothing grunge about Cher. She's the daughter of a rich lawyer in Beverly Hills, and while there are no school uniforms, the main characters wear kind of a uniform. It's these suits, and that kind of reference the school uniforms with the stockings also. But what does a girl like Cher do? Of course, she wears a designer item, and this plaid suit was Dolce & Gabbana. And there's one interesting detail about the movie, because the budget that Mony May had for all of the characters was only $200,000 US. So now you may say $200,000 US in 1995 was a lot of money. Yes, it was, but actually not for what she had to create. When you think about the schools that these people would go to in real life, it's quite likely that a lot of them wear designer items, and they are expensive. So to bring this whole vision to life, Mony May actually had to be really creative, because she had the $200,000. $60,000 was for Cher, who had 60 outfits, so on average $1,000. Then Dionne $50,000, and $40,000 for Ty and the rest of the classroom, or the rest of all of the friends. And because of this limited budget, Mony May had to be very creative with the outfits. This was probably the reason why she got hired, because at the time she was not yet a well-known costume designer. She met the director Amy Heckerling by chance, but somehow the two clicked. And this is why a lot of items in the movie were thrifted from small boutiques, from malls. They also asked friends to give them some clothes, and also quite a few outfits were actually made by Mony May herself. But at the same time, we can't really tell. It still looks very sophisticated. They look like we imagine rich people to look like. So actually Mony May did a really good job given the limited budget. And for this suit, they tried different colors. The first version was in blue, but Mony May said it didn't have enough oomph. Then she also said that the red version was too risque, and then she stumbled upon this yellow version by Dolce & Gabbana. She liked it, but she had some reservations because of the color yellow. Alicia Silverstone, who is Cher in the movie, is blonde, and yellow and blondes is sometimes a bit difficult, but she said once Alicia Silverstone put that suit on, she immediately knew this is Cher. She looked like a ray of sunshine. It made her stand out, and this was exactly the mission. It should be clear just from looking at the clothes that Cher is the main character of the movie. One interesting detail about the movie is about the backgrounds. Amy Heckerling and Mony May decided to keep the background muted, neutral, even boring, so that the outfits could pop. And now coming back to Cher and her best friend Dionne. Dionne has a similar outfit. It's also a suit, and it should match Cher's outfit without overpowering Cher, because Dionne is only the second in command. She's the best friend of Cher. And I said before, Cher's outfit is by Dolce & Gabbana, but given the limited budget, Mony May could not afford to get two of those, so she made that suit herself. She sourced the hat from a New York-based designer Coquin, I hope I said this correctly, and the vinyl detail is also reflected in Dionne's suit. In general, we can say that her skirts are a bit shorter than Cher's. This is a hint that Dionne was a bit more outspoken. She also had more experience with men, but they are always coordinated, and we know that they call each other every morning to coordinate their outfits. And Dionne loves to wear hats, and many of those were accidental finds, like for example this crazy spiral hat. And in general, these hats are also a reference of the rave culture that was going on at the same time in America and Europe. And I already hinted at it before, the girls don't really reflect what was really going on in American schools fashion-wise at the time. Amy Heckerling and Mony May visited schools in California and tried to find out what the kids were wearing. And then we have to understand it was mid-1990s, so we had kind of a crazy phase in fashion also. We had some crazy relics from the 80s. There were a lot of scrunchies, there were crazy patterns. There was a lot going on, and then we also had the grunge movement that I mentioned before. There was also a lot of flannel, for example, but we know that Cher would not be caught dead in flannel. So what Amy Heckerling and Mony May actually did was they created their own fashion language for the main characters of the school, and it was kind of also like looking into the future of what was going to come. I don't know if it was Clueless that also influenced what was going on fashion-wise, but it was a bit like looking into the future where the styles changed a bit. And for this look, Cher and Dionne, they would never look sloppy like the grunge kids. It's very coordinated. For this, Mony May actually had to take inspiration from the runways. There was no internet at the time, there was no international e-commerce, so she looked at runway shows, and she even flew to Europe to visit some of the runway shows and get inspiration for the outfits, and then somehow adapt them to the main characters of the movie. What is also interesting is that even for the boys, she adapted the fashion, so the boys are probably the ones that reflect what was going on at the schools most, but even their outfits are different because they wear designer items. And when we look at Murray, Dionne's boyfriend, of course Dionne chooses his clothes because she's a fashion queen, and then also her boyfriend has to kind of fit into the image, even though at first sight we would think, oh, he's one of these normal boys wearing the skater cargo pants and this kind of sloppy look, but at the same time it's very coordinated and very planned. And I already mentioned the limited budget before, and this also meant that some of the items were actually reworn. I have to admit, I didn't really realize it until I did the research for this video. For example, the skirt that Cher wears in the opening scene is also the skirt that she later wears when she has her driving test, when she wears the sheer blouse over it. And plaid was a recurring theme of the movie. We probably today can't even imagine Clueless without a plaid pattern. Even Cher's pajama has that pattern. And what is also interesting is these high stockings or socks that the girls are wearing. It's this typical reference of school uniforms, as we would say at first sight, but the inspiration actually came from Cabaret. Amy Heckerling said this was a detail that she absolutely wanted for the girls in the movie because she loved when Liza Minnelli was singing Mein Herr in Cabaret, and this was where the inspiration came from. I find this quite interesting because looking at the movie today, I look at these suits and the stockings and I think, oh, it's so 90s, because also a bit later Britney Spears used stockings and a school uniform for Baby One More Time, and even later in 2007 the girls in Gossip Girl also wear their kind of school uniform with the stockings. So I don't know if this was something that Clueless established. Just in my mind, when I look at these movies, I immediately think 90s school uniforms, or adapted school uniforms from the 1990s. And another very interesting detail is that you will never see the characters in stiletto heels, and this was also intentional. Heckerling and May wanted to make them look more innocent, so you have these fashionable and kind of sexy outfits, but because of the shoes, they never go too far. Heckerling said the girls should be authentic and realistic, so it was important that they don't become too sexy, so she opted for these block heels, very often also Mary Jane's. Let's move on to the next outfit. It's Cher's red Alaia dress that she wears to the Valley party. In general, it looks a bit cut-wise like a little black dress, but a little black dress for somebody like Cher would not be interesting enough, I would say. So they opted for the red color, and it's interesting because red is kind of sensual and sexy, but in a way it's not too much for Cher. Or let's say not too much for a girl like Cher in that movie. I'm not sure if when we were 15, 16, if we would have looked great in that dress, but on Cher it really works. And what I find so interesting about the characters, and especially Cher, is that she is an over-accentuated version of a rich Beverly Hills girl. And she lives a life that is so amazing and probably unattainable for most of us. But at the same time, for some weird reason, she's very authentic and very relatable. Probably most of us have once met a girl like Cher. And this is what the movie does really well. The girls or the characters in general, as crazy as they are still authentic. And by the way, just one detail, when I think of the clothes that we wore when we went out when we were like 15, 16, 17, it was a lot of denim, especially trousers. You would never see that on Cher. The denim trousers were actually only for Tai, the new girl from a middle class background. So you also see how the clothes were used to show kind of the social status or the social class that the girls were coming from. And this dress, or the scenes with this red dress, were also very important for the designer, because at the time Azzedine Alaia was already very famous in Europe, but not so much in America. And then there was this famous scene from the movie where Cher walks down the street and somebody tries to rob her and shouts, "Get down on the ground." And then she says like, "But you don't understand, this is an Alaia." And the thief says, "A what?" And she answers, "It's like a totally important designer." So within seconds, everybody in America who watched the movie also knew about Azzedine Alaia. And there's also a funny backstory about this, because Mony May spotted that dress on a friend. And she really wanted to have it for the movie, but back then it was not like today that there were PR companies that you could ask for sourcing outfits. They had to be very creative, they had to pull all the strings, they had to call in favors, they asked friends, and they managed to get that dress for the movie. So it was a success for Mony May, it was also a success for Azzedine Alaia, because actually that line, that it is a dress by this designer, was added later on after they actually included the dress. And coming back to Mony May's limited budget and creativity, that jacket that Cher wears, this black sheer jacket with the boa trim details, was actually made by Mony May herself. And this red dress also hints at another approach of the movie. It was the seasonal approach for all the outfits. So you may notice when you look closely, we follow them throughout the whole school year, and it's reflected in the clothes. In fall, around Halloween, it's more brown orange tones. At the Valley party at Christmas, everybody wears red and green. And when the new guy, Christian, comes to school, it's spring and we see a lot of pastel colors. So this is also an interesting detail, and it shows you how meticulously Mony May and Amy Heckerling planned that movie. And speaking of Christian, this leads me to the next dress, which I would like to discuss. It's the white slip dress by Calvin Klein. And it's actually one of my favorite scenes of the movie, because Cher and Christian meet her dad in the kitchen, and her dad looks at her and says, "What the hell is this?" And she answers, "A dress." Who says this? Calvin Klein. And it was so funny, and then the joke was even enhanced because her dad told her to wear something over it because it looked like underwear. And then Cher comes back with a sheer kind of blouse over it, which is basically nothing again. This was such a funny scene, and it's probably a scene that all of us still remember from that movie. And what I really find interesting about this dress is the backstory, because Mony May wanted to create a nude look, and they tried on different types of dresses, but none of them fit. some were too nude, some were too spandexy. And then she found this Calvin Klein slip dress, and it's white, it's matte, and we see why her dad would say it looks like underwear, so it really worked. And again, Cher was kind of a trendsetter because these underwear dresses or the slip dresses were really popular in the 90s. I remember many of us were wearing those slip dresses. I also have to say I see a lot of the Gen Zs wearing similar ones right now. And also later on in the 90s, there were the ones with lace appliques, also in silk. They looked even more like underwear, and they were worn on the red carpet. So again, this was something that shows how fashion forward the movie was. I already said before, there were no school uniforms at Cher's and Dionne's school. But even if there were uniforms, we would know that Cher and Dionne would be the type of girls who would manage to make those uniforms their own. They would tweak them a bit, it would look different on them, and it would make clear that they are the main characters, that they are the popular girls at school. And the scene that illustrates this best is actually the PE class, because we see kind of a uniform. Everybody obviously has to wear black and white, and the girls even make those gym style outfits special, because even looking at them today, they look quite modern, quite contemporary. Cher wears this black tank top over a white t-shirt, and then Dionne wears the same thing, just the other way around. So it's white on black, and it looks tuxedo inspired. And there's an interesting detail because they have these bottle holders that look like bags with these chain straps. And maybe immediately you were thinking about one brand. Actually, after the movie came out, Karl Lagerfeld got inspired by these bottle holders and actually included them in his Chanel collection. And Lagerfeld was not the only one being inspired by Clueless. When you look at Versace's Fall-Winter 2013 collection, you can clearly tell that some outfits were inspired by Cher's yellow plaid suit. And in the same year, the California-based label Wild Fox released a collection which was entirely Clueless themed. They even had a photo shoot emulating the scenes from the movie. Let's also quickly discuss Amber's style because it's quite interesting. She is Cher's frenemy and she tries to be like Cher, but she never really manages to achieve that. Her look, some call it camp, I find it sometimes gaudy, but still she manages to have her own style even though she looks a bit clownish or silly. And then also a funny thing happened. You may have seen my other video about the recent season of Emily in Paris, and there is this scene where Emily wears this black and white striped dress, and according to the costume designer, the inspiration was My Fair Lady, Audrey Hepburn. And I said in the video, it does not really give me Audrey Hepburn or My Fair Lady. There's something else, but I could not really tell what it was. And then I did the research for this video and I saw Amber's outfit and I actually had to laugh because it immediately gave me the same vibes as Emily in Paris. So I don't know if this is a good sign for the show Emily in Paris, but this is definitely what I was thinking about when I saw that black and white outfit. And let's also briefly look at Ty, the new girl, the new friend of Cher and Dionne, where they also do the makeover. I find this very interesting because probably her character shows how much the clothes contribute also to the development of the character itself. Because she arrives at the school, she's very artsy, you can see that with these graphic t-shirts that she wears. Then she gets the makeover by Cher. She looks like a clone, but not as sophisticated as Cher. Of course, she can't be like the queen. And then towards the end of the movie, she kind of finds herself. She finds out who she wants to be. And it's this kind of skater girl who also falls in love with Travis. So all of this is also reflected in the clothes. And we can see how much the clothes actually contribute to that whole character development. And as I mentioned in the introduction, I can't get this outfit software out of my head. So I admit for the research of this video, I also Googled these types of software and then I found an interesting detail. Amy Heckerling said that the inspiration for this software and this whole wardrobe was actually from real life. So I was seeing this, was like, oh, interesting, somebody has this software and this wardrobe. It was actually a Hollywood producer who had a passion for clothes, and he said he has so many clothes, but for some reason he always wears the same. And then he said he actually had to think of these racks at the dry cleaners that are moving movable, and he really wanted that for his home. And Amy Heckerling heard about this, and this is actually how this whole software and wardrobe idea came about. As you can see, I'm still obsessed with this idea. I really want this. So if any one of you wants to come catalog my closet, please feel free to let me know in the comments below. And I would also like to know, what did you think about the movie? Did you watch it at the time? What did you think about the fashion? Did you like it? Did you also want the software? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, I would really appreciate it if you could like it and if you could subscribe to my channel. If you want to read more fashion related articles, you can head over to my website, thepinklookbook.com, and you can also check out my fashion label Pelagona. And talking about the fashion of the 1990s, I have another related video which may be interesting for you to watch, where I talk about the clothes that we actually wore around the year 2000. Thank you very much for watching this video, and see you in the next one.